What up? What up? What up? I'm waiting for Corey. Can y'all hear me? Is this thing on? What up? What up? What up? I'm waiting for Corey. Can y'all hear me? All right, bet. Yeah, man, look. Oh, let me send this link to Corey real quick. I'm gonna send that link out. Yeah, man, I feel like we leaving breadcrumbs when we had these conversations. And there's is leading back. It keeps the conversation in a loop, right? When you drop nasty breadcrumbs, right? I'm going to say y'all dropping breadcrumbs, nasty breadcrumbs by accident. All right. I'm starting to believe, though, that it's deliberate, but I'm going to say by accident. By accident, right? When you drop those nasty breadcrumbs, people pick up those crumbs and follow those nasty breadcrumbs, right? All the way back to Black Egypt, right? Diop was wrong, not just in terminology. Oh, why this shit ain't go to? Hold on, give me a second. Be invite link. My bad, y'all. Hold on. I'm on this Zoom, man. Jesus Christ. I forgot how difficult this mess was. Man. Nothing. All right, got it. All right. My bad, y'all. Yeah, we was just on the community of skeptics in the House of Consciousness. Since I have my own show and panel, I don't push the conversation as hard on other people channels and platforms. I just show where I differ with the wherever I differ with the panel at, I don't push as hard. I wait to come on my show and give my full take and outlook on those conversations. Because I feel as though it's not fair to overburden somebody else's show with your disagreements, right? So as y'all can see, if anybody was over there, I have raised the question about Diop, right? Because we were saying that Diop, we were saying that Diop, they were saying that Diop was wrong for using Black or Negroid, right? Because those are outdated, unscientific racial terms, right? So I asked the question that barring that he was just wrong in terminology, or was he wrong far as wise the data? So because they were saying over there, nobody is Black, right? So by Diop saying, and nobody is Negroid. That's what they saying, the stance of modern science says that Negroid and Black are, racialized terms that, is outdated and they're not scientific. All right. So my question was, so Diop is wrong in using those outdated racial terms, or was he wrong in pointing to a phenotype and because what I'm saying is that Diop, if you just say that he was wrong because he used outdated terms, it's still people that he was saying, whether you put the terminology Black or Negroid on him, right? He was still pointing to a population of people that he was saying was the Egyptians. And I'm saying that the conference answered both questions, right? By them showing that those terms, right, of racial terms is, unscientific, right? They were saying that, and they were saying that the group that you're pointing to, don't matter what name you put on it, those weren't the Egyptians. That's my takeaway from it. I feel like they answered the question all the way around the board. You feel me? Let me see where Corey at. So yeah, I know my man Gull about to go live over on his channel. Is called the Book of Al Jahiz, right? It's called the Book of Al Jahiz. But I definitely wanted to come on here and basically, and then Unc had went and showed a picture of Anwar Sadat. president of Egypt. And they were saying that's what the Egyptians looked like with the Sudanese admixture. And we know that Anwar Sadat, right, was pretty much, heavily, what's the word for him? Nubian, right? was heavily Nubian, right? Even, and you have Nubians that live in the borders of Egypt, in southern Egypt. So, I mean, I just think it's tricky all the way around. Yeah, I'm definitely behaving, Miss Tamika. How you doing? How y'all doing anyway? Yeah, why not use a modern Egyptian? Right. So it's basically, man, I feel like the way that we couch in this argument, even in our disagreements, right? Those breadcrumbs is going to lead back to Black Egypt. Those breadcrumbs are going to lead back to Black Egypt. Somehow, they're going to make Diop right. I'm telling y'all. Watch. By the end of September, this conversation going to go full circle, and somehow Diop is going to be right. So this whole shit is going to start right back over again. What I say, I was clear. I said the ancient Egyptians or the Egyptians, right, was not or did not look like West and Central Africans. Simple and plain. It did not look like that group of people. And somehow they squirmed around and somehow kind of made them look like those people in the very same conversation that we had. They squirmed around when I said it, right? And then by the end, they somehow couched that with Black and dark skin, and somebody said something about a Nigel Kadofian, and they showed the map of some people all the way down in Uganda, right? And they said that these are the Nilo-Saharans, and somehow all that went into that conversation about Egypt, and they just turned Black again. Just that quick. It was crazy. It's like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. It's like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. Utterly crazy. Now the Egyptians look like the Ethiopians. So now the Ethiopians is what the ancient Egyptians actually looked like. I mean, it's crazy. You right, Tuck. Blackology always win on YouTube. It always wins somehow. Somehow. So somehow the Ethiopians then went up to Egypt and started the Egyptian civilization. Like, man, it's never ending. Yo, Corey, hit me up, talking about hit the button real quick. I hit the button and this dude go to sleep. Crazy. Cube, what up? Man, I swear, man, like it's like I said, it's these nasty breadcrumbs that we're dropping, man. Um, and like I say, with these nasty breadcrumbs, is these nasty breadcrumbs it's almost like, how do I want to say it? It's like they forced Egypt away from the Mediterranean, right? Now, if you say Egypt is Mediterranean, you got to say it a particular type of way. You got to say that uh, Egypt started Mediterranean culture. They didn't come out of the Mediterranean. Nobody came out of the Mediterranean. So now you got to say, if you connecting them with the region that Egypt is actually in, somehow you're wrong, right? Um, Taking populations that somehow drifted into Egypt, uh, into their gene pool, right? Just by them being in Africa, somehow, if you don't acknowledge them, then you're wrong. Um, I just, it's just like saying, you know, Egypt is an indigenous African civilization. The only reason why that point probably uh actually mattered back in the day is because some people was trying to use the biblical narrative that uh civilization or whatever was sparked by Semitic people, and is somehow, civilization and all of that stuff came from the Fertile Crescent. So I think that's why, people looked for the beginning of Egyptian civilization in Mesopotamia, right? So I think that's a reason why, them saying that it's indigenous African is to show that the civilization, is clearly an African spawned civilization and it didn't come from outside of Africa. But by them saying that, I don't think they were saying anything genetically about the people. I don't think that they were saying anything phenotypic about the people by saying that Egypt, right, the Egyptian civilization is indigenous to Africa. I don't think that they were making a phenotypic statement, right? I think it was a cultural achievement and progress type statement, saying that the writing and all of the rudiments that went into that civilization was actually African, right? I think they can show that by the zoo types that the Egyptians chose to use in their writing system. That's like one of the biggest clues, right? That their characters that they chose to use to write, and all of their art forms show, basically African flora and fauna. So hold on, let me drop this link since I couldn't drop it. But yeah, man, they, guy over there on Unc channel called me goofy and everything. They just can't stand for clarity. To come to these conversations. You know, the moment you start bringing clarity, they get hurt. By you saying Egypt ain't black, right? You somehow taking something away from them. They feel as though, you know what I mean? Two P's, what up?
What's up, brother? What's up? What's up? I told you this weeks ago, that the term African is dog whistle language. When you ask average person, the average black person, what African means, describe an African. They're not describing an Egyptian. They're not describing a North African. They're not describing a Libyan. We know who they're describing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So people was all right with using the term African because they can sneak their point on. But it's the same language, right? Because people still say it's not Mediterranean. It's that Egypt created the Mediterranean, as if the Mediterranean never existed before Egypt was there. But Egypt created the culture. But it's a knowing battle. You know that. You know that. It's a knowing battle. Corey know that too. I'm sorry that Corey is sleeping. And I understand, I realize that you were trying to be politically correct in the show. You never lose your temper, you were rational, and you respect other people's platform.
Right.
Right? because you can't say seriously, but no, there's no such thing as black African Egypt. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Right? But we're not giving that one. That one, they're not going to give up that one. You know that. You figure it out, right? Because all of a sudden, nobody understands what the word black means or Negroid. We know that it's outdated, but nobody understands what the word is anymore. It's non-scientific, as if we don't know what people were saying when they said Negroid, Mongoloid, or Caucasoid. The
Fact.
Yo,
out,
yo,
Whoa, what's up, Gozy?
what's up, my brother? Peace, peace. How y'all doing?
What's going on?
Oh, nothing, man. How you doing, Chef? How you doing, Sweet Peas, man? I'm sorry for cutting your wisdom.
no problem.
No, the Egyptians were not. We don't want to play this game, man. Let's follow the human evolution or follow the phylogenetic tree. The only time North Africa could be described as black is when Homo sapiens arose somewhere in between East Africa and when the Tyrian people, this is not even what Jebel Hud was, who was a archaic Homo sapien. You can also find the same skull in South Africa, the same type called Floresbad skull. They found another one in Sudan that was very similar to Jebel Hud. But these were archaic Homo sapiens. But when you look at the torso of the Tyrians, even though they had robust features and they look very close to Aboriginal type people in morphology, they were the only population of people that was tropical adapted because Homo sapiens developed in tropical zones, right? When they migrated into North Africa 130,000 years ago, they had a lot of isolation from populations south of the Sahara. They didn't even have a lot of the later derived traits and mutations that a lot of sub-Saharan African population have today. We have a lot of later derived traits. We represent a population who mixed with ghost populations who were very similar to what Jebel Hud was, which was an archaic Homo sapien. We also have ancient East Africans who crossed from East Africa that was closer to the Mersey people 65,000 years ago and mixed with indigenous populations of West and Central African hunter-gatherers. That we descend from ancient North Africa that gave us haplogroup E, which is the Paleo-Saharan population. And we know that all of the non-African populations who come from the placement holder marker CTM168 was developed somewhere in between North Africa. He was the population that gave rise to people out of Africa. So even ancient North Africans, starting at around 50,000 years ago, were already shifted towards becoming Eurasian, right? Because Eurasians split from them. They split between the North African corridor, crossing through Upper Egypt and Sudan. So these people got a very long distance and mutations and adaptive changes, and the people that back migrated possibly through Italy, not through the Gibraltar, but the people that was closer to the Zuzana population, who was closer to the early Holocene Iranian populations, who gave mtDNA U6 back to North Africa as early as 23,000 years ago and mixed with the population that was close to the Hadza. And the Hadza-like population that shows up in the Ibero-Maurusians or the Tafarites are closer to non-African populations. And the reason why they can be used is because the placement holder marker for the Hadza, right? If you look at them as a base population example, they are BM60, which is a sibling lineage to CTM168 that gave rise to non-Africans. So the Hadza are very close to the non-African populations more than any indigenous African population, right? So with that being said, when they go over there, they're mixing with people already. So you got that wave of people coming in. And yes, they were dark skinned, but the Ibero-Maurusians was not tropical adapted, right? They mixed with population that was indigenous. So the Tyrians leave from North Africa. They have a run between 150,000 to 30,000 years ago. They're damn near absent. It's a lot of places that's barren in North Africa where these people that's like Cro-Magnon humans, which is Homo sapiens, still us, find refuge in North Africa. And they breed with the vestiges of leftover populations. And this becomes these Ibero-Maurusians. Then you got the Capsians. Then you got these pastoralist groups of people who are leaving, who are mixed with ancient Egyptian hunter-gatherers, right? Who cross into the Levant, mixed with the Cambrian population. And the Cambrian population creates this Natufian population. And then after the Natufian population, you got the pre-Proto-Neolithic A, B, and C group. Some of these people become pastoralists. They're domesticating sheep. They're carrying their animals with them. And some of these people are crossing back into Africa. And they're going through Egypt, going through Algeria. They're becoming the Capsian groups. As they become the Capsian groups, they're bringing the pastoralist method through the Dakhla Oasis, through the Nile, going through the Sahara, crossing in, and mixing with the fragmented population. Then in the further north in southern Europe, now you got Neolithic Anatolian farmers crossing through Gibraltar, hitting North Africa, going into the Atlas Mountains, right? Mixing with the indigenous population. So the whole segment of the population is already blended with three waves. And you have a lot of Eurasian phases coming in. And then you have parallel evolution taking place. When you look at all the phases of North Africa, it completely destroys the idea of anybody being a sub-Saharan African like we are. Morphologically, they would have been very robust Caucasoids before they became more gracile Caucasoids. And Caucasoid does not mean white. That's what people got to understand. Or Middle Eastern North African white is not the same thing as European white. So with that being said, but they do have shared affinity, especially with populations in Southern Europe. But we also have to remember that the Anatolian farmers was a sister group that was slightly related to the Natufian population in the Levant. So when you look at that, you can see the segments of what's going on. So when we learn how to deal, or the people learn how to deal with PCAs, they don't have to be so emotional about the distance with population in Africa, and let the Egyptians be Egyptians and the North Africans be North Africans, the Amazigh people, right? Let them be their own group and still be African without being tropical adapted Black Africans with fast twitch muscles, with certain conditions like sickle cell to help fight off malaria that we developed in the wet phase of the Green Sahara, with certain things like muscle fiber oxidase in certain zones, which makes us good at sprinting. All types of unique traits the sub-Saharan Western Central African have that's different than populations south and north, or even east, right? North Africans have a gene variant that's responsible for catching Parkinson's disease. Sub-Saharan Africans don't have that at a higher rate compared to them. So we have to respect the mutations, and we have to respect the genetic shifts that all populations have that makes us distinct while still being the same species. So if we follow the phylogenetic tree, and if we really love evolution, there's no room to be biased. There's no room to be racist. And any person that really deals with genetics and biology, it's nothing to get emotional about. We're arguing over stubborn mutations and morphology to say who's who. Ancient Egyptians range in skin tone. They were light skinned and they were darker skinned, but they still had the morphology as Caucasoid, even if they were dark skinned. You know, so they were still distinct from populations that was living in Cameroon, Nigeria, Senegal. And even when we talk about base populations, you got some people that try to hold on to the Fulani. The Fulani are mixed with ancient North Africans, but they're still highly sub-Saharan African. So you can't say the Fulani is the ancient Libertines when you try to play that, because even they are highly sub-Saharan African and share the sub-Saharan African component that they have is 70% with Mandinka and Wolof type people, even though they had anybody in that Sahel got dipped in with populations that was further north, but they are not those populations in North Africa, but they can have some shared affinities. Feel me? Just like the African American has a lot of Yemeniya or Caucasus hunter gatherer or Russian steppe European DNA. We share that. Them Yemeniyas was related to us, and we got that from our Northwestern European ancestors due to colonization or mixing or whatever happened. There's a distinction. So we have to accept all of this. It's all mutation. So the Egyptians were not black. I would not call them black when you start them, even if they were darker skinned. You cannot put them in the same banner as a taxon of what's labeled as black or whatever, if we really follow this stuff for what it is. The back migrations, the parallel evolutions, the adaptive traits, the convergence evolutions, all types. These people have more favor and affinity with people in the Near East and Middle East than they would have in tropical zones of Nigeria, Cameroon, or Congo. Now, if we want to base things off the few Nilotic people that was in the borders, or the Omotic trait that's found in them at 15%, that Omotic trait is very old to North Africa, because the Hadza population had an Omotic allele, which shipped from the early Assyrians or the later phase of the Assyrians, because the Assyrians had 4 major waves in North Africa. So we have to be very selective when we speak. That's all I want to say. I don't want to take over the show, bro.
No. You just said something, right? And you say that because they brought up the Nilotic people, right? And I was just having this conversation, and I'm like, it's almost equivalent to saying that if somebody look at the demographics of the United States And just because they see Asian people here, right? You wouldn't say that this is an Asian culture because you have 3% Asians here, right? And they should show up in a genetic record, right? You wouldn't say that they were goddamn that the United States was made up of Asian people. You'll say, well, basically you have some Asians there, right?
Right.
The same way you wouldn't say that the United States is an African civilization just because you have 11%,
So, so
go ahead.
you're absolutely right. I don't want to cut your wisdom. So to a nigga that ain't never been nowhere, and let's say all you know is the hood and Afrocentricity, and we know that Black people make up 13% of the United States. I'm talking about the African North Americans or the people that descend from kidnapped West and Central Africa. It's about 40 million of us, or 35 million, 40 million to 35 million. Europeans make up 65% of the United States. So to a nigga that ain't never been nowhere, that little small 11 to 14% that represent Black people, you're going to think that that's the only world that only exists and everybody else is a minority. And they're not looking at Egypt from from being a country or a national thing. Like what they like to do is hold on to a few of the populations that was in North Sudan who were who shared certain borders south of Aswan, who were like the police magi population that they use as policemen, right? But here's the thing. Egyptians expanded their borders. That doesn't mean that Nilotics was indigenous to there. You always had border motherfuckers drifting at the south of Aswan, lingering around because it only makes sense based on proximity. But they were not the overwhelming overall population. So to lie and say it wasn't a type of Black population, that would be completely wrong because that doesn't make sense, especially at the border near south of Aswan, not the country Aswan itself. Not to mention a lot of Nubians recently migrated to Aswan in 1960 in different phases of time. But before that, the Egyptians expanded their borders into Nubia, and some of those became Egyptian nomes. And they also used a lot of the Bija type who are highly Levantine, even though they're mixed with Nilotic, they're highly Levantine mixed. They used a lot of those people in their military, I'm talking about the Proto-Bija. But even when they play the Arab game, the Arabs shared a lot of genetic affinity with Egyptians anyway, because the ancient Egyptians was highly Natufian-like. So with that being said, when you look at they found a hair piece in Nubia going back 4,000 years, right? And when they looked at the DNA, it was a Levantine signature there. So this let you know that these semi-Nilotic people, or these, let's say, Cushitic people like Ethiop Somali type, just like the people in the Horn, were highly North African anyway in mixture. And if you're North African, you're gonna have the Levantine signature by default. So we look at these niggas at the border south, or even the ones with the stronger features that was thinker-like in morphology. But you look at the PCAs of a lot of modern Egyptians, you find that some of these people with 6% Nilotic, 5% Nilotic. It only makes sense because it's by proximity, but it doesn't mean that the overall population was that. So we looking at these niggas in the borders near Karmar, Napata Playa, and thinking that represents ancient Egypt, and it does not. And it's just like with us, who represent 11 to 14% of the United States. If you ain't never been nowhere, you think that this is the only world that exists until you go out and realize that, damn, most of the United States is white. I'm talking about not just shit. Well, I'm talking about most of these, the United States is white. You got older white populations that descend from the British, the Irish, Swedish people, French, fucking Spaniards from Spain that came over here. Most of the United States all the way to Latin America is European, whether it's Mediterranean European or Nordic European. Most of the United States from North America to South is highly European and they're predominant. Black people only make up 14 to 11%. We're not a majority here. We're a minority. We're actually behind the Latino population, who a lot of them are intermediates. They have mestizo types, highly Native American, highly Mediterranean. Some of them are, you have the Afro-Latinos, which is a smaller population in Latin America, and they play the games with including them. But overall, Black people make up a small percentage. So even in ancient Egypt, no one can say there wasn't a few Blacks there, but they represent a small population. And we can't use populations that was in the border to think that represents the entirety of the country of Egypt. It's insultive, it doesn't make sense, and it's problematic to the population that's there today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and those people have a problem, with that, and nobody is excluding. Now, because this is the issue. When you say stuff like this, or we bring these type of arguments, what they're going to do is they're going to be facetious, right? So the fact that they can show the Nubian type there, that's where they're going to stick at. So they're going to say, you're wrong because those people was there. And then they're going to say, it don't matter how much was there. All I'm saying is they was there, right? So what I'm saying is that's why I titled the show, right? The nasty breadcrumbs, because they know when they drop these nasty little breadcrumbs, right, that the people is going to pick them up and run all the way back to Black Egypt, right?
Nah,
because
yeah.
then hold on, check this out. Because after they belabor the point that a minority group of dark-skinned people was there, right, in the border area, right? Once they belabor that point, check this out. Then they're gonna start talking about the culture come from the South. That Egypt is a Nubian, the culture of Egypt is a Nubian transplant. I think they read that somewhere, right? So now, coupling that with all of that, right? Now it's just a whole bunch of nasty breadcrumbs that get led back to people believing that Egypt was Black. Because that minority group that we're talking about, they're going to say that the culture started in the South, right? So obviously the original people of Egypt must have been those people. It's a nasty cycle that's going to keep on, and we're going to keep on having to argue these points forever.
But we have to be careful with the South, because South of Upper Egypt does not mean Black. When you look at the Falahin or the Sadi people, right? These the Sadi or the Coptic Egyptians, right? And you look at the Falahin, some people might try to say they mix with a little Turk, or they mix with whatever, the Mongolots that came in, whatever. That's a very small signature, right? But here's the thing: Upper Egypt was not Black, or even Nubia. The Nubian A group, and the Nakata group shared a lot of affinities. So the Nubian A group was very distinct in certain layers with the Nubian C group. In Sudan, a lot of these mixtures start in North Sudan anyway. I'm talking about a non-Black population who was North African Libertine, who carried a lot of Libertine signatures, hit the border of Sudan, mixing with Paleo-Saharan populations. I mean, the only time you really find this Negroid morphology in Sudan, it was there. Don't get it twisted, because when you look at Jebel Sahaba grave 13,000 years ago, those pre-Nilotic people, or when you look at Wadi Hafla in that region, of course they were there. But you also have another population that was next to Jebel Sahaba, and this is this is before Jebel Ramallah, right? The Jebel Ramallah with intermediate populations. But when you get into Jebel, there's 20 miles away from Jebel Sahaba, which is, what phase was this? This is the I get to come to me later as I talk. You had a population that was classified as North African, Libertine, European. So just because something possibly did come from the South, because the elements of inception of Egypt has a South element, and it has a far North element, from all the way up to the cup of the Mediterranean. When you look at the house structures, even before the tumuli that people try to use that was in the Sahara, a lot of the Natufians in the Levant buried their dead under their houses and built the shafts the same way we find in some of the base signatures of ancient Egypt, right? So this is a very combined situation. So you can't play that South thing. And if you do play the South thing, look at the people in the South to understand what's going on, especially in the Quadan culture. There we go. And the Quadan culture next to Jebel Sahaba. So Nubian doesn't mean Black the way we think it do. We think it do because we have a small mind. The Nubian A group was very close to the Nakata anyway, and they were highly Libertine-like in genetic signature. These are not a Bantoid or Congoid population that represents the base population of these people.
They was Cushitic. They was Cushitic Somali type people.
That's right. And the Somali type is classified, if you want to call it, like Soekiata say, Ethio-Somali, which has an ancient Libertine corridor, or you can say what Hawa said. They were swarthy skinned Caucasoids in morphology. We're not going to act like.
Hold on. Can I
go ahead, brother. Okay. I'm gonna jump off and get. I'm gonna get on because I know my boy Gullah going in.
Let me say this real quick. Hey,
stupid.
I'm finna get off here real quick. I just want to say something real quick. I ain't just be on here long. I'm finna go live on my own show. I just letting everybody know I'm still gonna lie tonight, and I'm finna go in on this Diop on linguistics and what he got wrong in linguistics.
Hello?
Go ahead, CPs.
What happened to them? They got drop off?
No. He said he's gonna do. My brother Gullah said he's gonna do his show. And he said he's gonna show what Diop went wrong in linguistics. And we
Gullah,
gotta
drop the name of your channel in the chat. Drop the name of your channel in the chat.
Yeah,
we
put,
gotta
put that link in the chat, Gullah.
Hey, I want y'all to know.
Chat.
I want y'all to know. Team
No, this is what I want to say. Slow down. I understand what you're saying, but you're talking. Just slow down by about 10%. But I forgot to teach you how to talk slow, because the good information is flying past too fast.
Okay,
you know, it's like I'm watching an F1 race. My head just going zoom, zoom. And like I'm at NASCAR, zoom, 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 zoom.
Let me just say this. Let me just say this, my African Caribbean brother. I wanted to say this to add on. Let me just say this. Team Osiris already did the work years ago debunking Dr. Anthony Jope. I respect him as being a doctor and a scientist. But the linguistic thing, this is what made me separate from certain people, right? Like certain people that was inside of our group, with big brother Unc and Amara Squad. You know, certain people that was affiliated with us was trying to play that game with Dr. Jope, and this is what we already did the work on debunking. His linguistic thing. The Egyptians were not a Niger Congo speaking people. They were not a Bantu speaking people. And I know Gullah Geechee's going to go in on that on his show as well. So we just got to get out here, man.
So question, because I remember having this discussion almost a year ago, and somebody jumped on the Nubian and said the language, the early Egyptian writing style came from Nubia. And when you hear the term Nubia, growing up as a layman, that is dog whistle language for Black people. And now you are describing the ancient Nubian as more a Mediterraneanish people than actually a sub-Saharan people. Am I wrong in assuming that's what you're doing?
I mean, yeah, you could say that, because I don't have an issue with, I'm like Christopher Ehret or Gullah. I don't have an issue with Mediterranean. Mediterranean is just a border that sits in between North Africa, Southern Europe, and the Eastern Mediterranean all the way to Turkey. So with that being said, in morphology, they share a lot of affinities. It's not just one ethnic groups that make up the Mediterranean world. They are very ancient creolized people that share things, especially when it comes to wheat and barley and grapes and all types of things, and sexual selection with the same women. So yes, I'm saying that the Nubian A group, even, you know, we got to look at the Mahas that brought the Nilotic element there that came a bit later. The earlier Nubian A group probably spoke a language that was Afro-Asiatic, like the Egyptians, right? Or the Amazigh or the Hausa people. See, when we look at people today, right, we think that because they live in a certain area today, that's what they always look like. How about if I told you like the ancient Hausa in Chad land, that's Afro-Asiatic, they have a high rate of R1B. Guess what? Those dudes that came in with R1B that drifted all the way down used to be white people. And you can see that even with Black Americans, right? Who are, they could be 5 to 10% British, but their Y chromosome go back to the UK. And you can see this shift in 200 years. And only less than 200 years. Like I give Drake analysis all the time. Drake father's an African American. His father's probably about 70 to 80% sub-Saharan African. His mother's a Jewish woman. Drake turned around and had a baby by a French lady. Now look at his son. That happened within a small span of time, less than 100 years. So imagine.
Let me cut it. Last night we had this discussion on Cubota channel, and when you look at Grace Jones is one of the blackest women. Grace Jones is a Jamaican. Yeah. And anybody who knows Grace Jones is one of the blackest women you ever see. Yeah. Grace Jones had a child with a white man. And when you look at Grace Jones' grandchild, where her son had with a white woman, is a white baby from the Caucasoid Mountain. that is 2 generations. If we look at Meghan Markle's son and daughter that she had with Princess Harry, Meghan Markle's mother is Black American.
Exactly.
Who had her with a white man. And those children are white children from the Caucasoid Mountain.
Exactly.
So it don't take more than 2 generations. I used to say at least 4, but I'm seeing it takes 2 generations.
So So here's the thing, bro. So here's the thing, Sweet Pete. Now, look, I don't want to cut your wisdom because I got to go and I'm gonna jump back on. Imagine Mediterranean people crossing through Gibraltar or coming through the Levant with light skin, these white-looking people, swampy olive-skinned people. And they go south and they meet up with these West African hunter-gatherers, or they meet up with these other groups of people. As them men penetrate these women for 3,000 to 5,000 years consistently, it'll produce a Hauser-looking nigga today. You look at these niggas, you can be like, damn, that's a nigga, that's a black man. But when you look at their genetics, they have ancient Eurasian DNA in them, and I'm sure they forefathers that came in 6,000 years ago look nothing like them today. I want you to know that. You know what I'm saying? So this 6,000 years ago, we see this shit happen within 300 to 400 years amongst us, or 100 years amongst us right now. So this whole thing about skin is a problem. Skin can go backwards and forward. The earlier Caucasoids in North Africa were more robust compared to the later gracile Caucasoids. But at the end of the day, these are small signatures at the Klein and demi level that cause these shifts in alleles or pairs of genes that make us look distinct. It doesn't separate us as a species. That's why I have no problem with a person looking like Gaddafi, or an Italian looking person from North Africa being African, or a person that looks like Patrice Lumumba being an African. I mean, we're looking at small shifts. Only people that's tripping over that is people that don't have a scientific mind. So I have enough sense now to respect the North African for being a North African, regardless of what he looked like. At one phase of my history and my time, I was a colorist. Yes, I was. But if you want to be truthful about genetics and you really deal with biology for real, it has no room for race. You know what I'm saying? At all.
Are they us? That's a big question. Are the Egyptians
No,
us?
no, they're
Then
not.
so they might be dark skinned, but they're not us. They might be
No,
light skinned, but they're not us.
they're not us.
They might be beige skinned, but they're not us.
They're not us. An Egyptian will be more closer to a Palestinian or Arab more than anybody. So no, they're not us. I'm gonna jump back on, brother.
We need the debate. Sheffrin, we need the debate.
I'm gonna jump back on, man. Peace and love to y'all, man. I'll be right back.
We need to talk to Garfield. Gunnar just need to learn to speak slower, because he's going to make all that information fly over people's head, because he's moving too fast. But we need that debate, Sheffrin.
That's a fact.
We need a serious debate.
You see my screen?
I'm looking, but I don't see nothing except your picture. Yes, I see the screen. Yes. I see the building.
You know what that is?
This is a mud building. Where was this? The mosque. It's a mosque in Mali.
Right. Listen, this is supposedly been, the mosque of the, great kingdom of Mali, right? And you see it everywhere. It was supposed to have been built in the medieval era, right? But I read something today that messed my head up. Huh?
That's a modern building. Don't let nobody tell you that built medieval time.
Exactamundo.
If castles in England that were built of stone in medieval time are now rumble, that is a building that is made out of clay bricks and wood. If castles in England, and we can bring up castles in England from medieval time, when they were protecting themselves from the attack of the Vikings, they went on castle building out of stone. And most of those castles are now rubble in less than 1,000 years. Are you telling me that a mud building survived? Go to Babylon and look at the mud building there that were built, and those are totally eroded. Sand, breeze, wind, rain. This building, in order for it to look this good, it had to be maintained over and over and over again. That's a modern building. That building not even 400 years old. Don't let people tell you foolishness.
Yeah. So
how old scientists say it is?
Well, according to Afrocentrists, it goes back to the 13th century, right? But I read that when the French got there, it looked like this.
What I tell you, see, I couldn't. What I tell you, clear. You see,
Right?
God. Oh,
So the report is that the French did this in 1907. The French built this. They say when they got there, the Muslims was praying outside on the ground. It was a mud hut. The only thing that was standing was where they had buried the scholars at, right? They had a little mausoleum that they kept up. That was the only part of this medieval structure that was still standing, was the mausoleum part where they buried the different scholars and, you know, notable imams that came from there, right? So when they built the city up for modern commerce, they say the French said, you know, we ain't gonna just knock it down, blase, blase, we gonna make a new one, right? And they used an architectural style and tried to make it look as African as they could, but it's completely their design, and they used African slave labor to do it. It's a forced labor. It's crazy.
So they would provide the money and the resources to do it.
And the architectural plan. Like
the architecture.
they drafted yeah.
Because although it was slave labor might have been free, but the slave had to eat while they're building this. So that's what building teach. When people talk about infrastructure, if we look at infrastructure in America, the reason why we have all of those buildings that look so beautiful and wonderful is because they had the money to build it. When you go to King Leopold, Belgium, prior to King Leopold going into Belgium and getting all of that money, Belgium was a shitty looking city, but he got the money and he could build. Because his money build buildings, you know, not only labor. People have to eat and it costs money. So now people is telling me that this building lasted 1,000 years. This building has to be repaired almost every year after rainfall, after heavy rains. Somebody has to be repaired. It's mud. It's in the desert. And not because in the desert you don't have heavy rains. Rains fall at least once or twice a year.
Yeah, it's like, man, I swear we've been fighting to be on par with
the European.
with Europeans that we're lying about history, our history so bad that it's only gonna hurt us in the end. Right? All of this shit we doing, man, like it's only going to hurt us in the end. My daughter start college Monday, right? She moved into her dorm, right? Yo, the worst thing you want to do is send your child to an institution of higher learning and they're not armed to protect themselves, right? You know,
with a ton load of
all of this stuff. And imagine she go in there, right? If I would have taught her all of this stuff, right, that the conscious community teach, all of this bad scholarship, the moment the truth would have, it could have changed my child's life, right? It could have. Some people can get broken over this shit. You dig what I'm saying? Like we don't. This shit is bad, yo. Right, but it is.
But friend, when they use the word empire, they don't understand why the European build the way they build is out of a need. They were always in constant war. Spain, up until what, 400 years ago, was almost 5 countries. England was like 6 different countries, different areas, Normandy and England, and so they were in constant war. So they had to build to protect themselves. So they had to build fort-like buildings. We didn't have to build that. They had winters, so they had to build buildings X-wing. Not because we see the buildings that they built compared to the buildings that we built and saying that they were better than us. No, they had to do it for protection. The weapons that they developed was because they were in constant strife with each other. So they were always improving on the weaponry. We didn't need to do that. There was enough resources and enough land in West Africa where if you had a problem with somebody, you could move 500 miles away and find somewhere just as nice as where you left. You could not do that in Europe. So they had to defend their own and fight every day.
Yeah, it is. I agree, but it is not just. It's not just a mere fact that that conflict breeds technology, right? Or the need to protect yourself or feed yourself is always going, it's going to be an impetus to move technology forward. I'm not arguing that. I totally agree. But I think that the Africans below the Sahara, for the most part, or Africans that I think the people that we descend from and people who look like us was always under constant pressure to improve their situation, right? We was used as slaves going back to the BC era. You dig what I'm saying? So they always had the impetus to develop technology and to have to defend themselves. So if you're saying that the English and the French, the reason why they produce better technology is because they was always at war.
Always in conflict, right?
Yeah,
Constant conflict.
but we was always under attack also.
Not all right. If we want to be realistic, after World War I, America was still majorly agrarian society. When World War II came about, it had a big industrial boost, especially since Europe couldn't be building anything because the war was happening everywhere in Europe and the infrastructure was under constant bombardment by Germany, in England and France and Italy. So America became the manufacturer for the European wars. Most of the airplanes came out of America that the British used to bomb Germany. And then the Americans started shipbuilding and they invested a lot of money into infrastructure. That's why after World War II, when the rest of the world was in a rebuilding process, America was already built. So most of America used to supply goods to most of the world. In 1950, America was the China of the world. All of the refrigerators, all of that came out of America because of the conflict which existed and the conflict which spurred innovation. And then after that, America went into the space race, and the space race developed further innovation because many of the things we use today, microwaves, the food processing situation, HACCP, certain kind of things that came in philosophies that were developed was a result of the space race. Computers, the need for computers arise, the need for better communication arise through the space race. Conflict caused innovation than anything else. They can look around the world. Anywhere that please by a lot of conflicts, you're going to have a lot of innovation.
I agree. But the conflict was in Africa also. So if that's the case, and I'm with you, then we had to answer a fundamental question. Why wasn't sub-Saharan Africans building the technology to defend themselves because they were constantly under attack? Where if you're saying other people, hold on, you're saying that, so for me, you're basically saying that these other people are basically smarter than us.
No.
Because every other people conflict made them build technology.
Yeah, but it's in because
but stupids, we was always in conflict.
yeah, but the difference with our conflict and their conflict is that if you look at Europe, right? Europe was already settled fully and basically overmined from the time of the Greek and the Roman. By the time the Romans came about, the thing like the European lions used to be in Europe, and bears used to be in Europe. But by the time the Romans were finished, most of the lions in Europe were already dead. Most of the bears in Europe were killed. They already ripped most of the resources. So they weren't as rich in resources as Africa. The population in Africa was not that big, so people could move. So once a conflict arises and you play avoidance, you could pack up and move to avoid such conflicts, go deeper into the interior, go into the Congo, go other places. You had vast tracts of lands to move to and vast amount of water. So there was no reason to stay and defend as in Europe. In Europe, you had to defend because there was nowhere to go and there was no resources. Most of the forests in England were already demolished by the Romans to build a stupid wall, to build castles to protect them from the Scottish coming down. Most of the resources in Rome were already gone because of the constant conflict with the Germanic tribes. So the act of defending, they had to find other ways to defend. They couldn't use wood anymore because most of the forests were already gone. If you drive through the back country of certain European countries, they have nice pastoral land. They don't have much forest because most of the forests are already cut down. Unlike in Africa, they had more resources. So if you have resources, why am I going to fight you for a stupid piece of land when there's 1,000,000 acres 20 miles down the road? Should I stay and defend the land here or just move my people for their own safety? It's not that we were smarter. We had the resources. We could move. They couldn't move. And they didn't have any resources because they were already trapped there with the ice to the north and most of the land deforested and most of the animals killed.
No, I agree. You just made a hell of a point. I take that. You know what I mean? We had more room to move around.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you will pack up and run before you. Yeah, it makes sense.
Before you fight and lose, and why you fight and lose 1,000 men? When the 1,000 men could move, and everybody alive.
I mean, and it's crazy that you said that because Chancellor Williams make that same point in the destruction of Black civilization. He makes the same point why you see so many tribes and ethnicities, and he say how, you know, they all was splitting off from each other, running in different directions.
Right.
You know, 100 years later, you know, they meet back up and they don't even remember that they was once the same group. You know what I mean?
Really don't recognize each other. The Indians in North America did it too. That's why they couldn't understand why the white man needed to own the land. Because to the Indian in North America, he could not imagine somebody killing 10 million buffalo in less than 2 years. When the white man started killing buffalo, the Native American couldn't believe it because they could look over on the plain and buffalo was on the plain for miles. They could eat buffalo, they had meat. What are they fighting for? What are you fighting for? You're fighting for meat? Look on the plains. There's 2 million, 3 million buffaloes and 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 1 million Indian. One buffalo was big enough to feed how many people?
Yeah, them
800 people.
buffalo.
A 2,000 pound buffalo. How much meat can one person eat in a day? And if
Right.
you kill one buffalo a day, it's like it don't impact the population. But when the white man came and wanted the buffalo for his fur, he just started killing them, skinning them, and leaving the carcass in the field. And he killed millions of buffalo in no time. The Indian couldn't understand that.
Yeah, that's a fact. Look, they they in the chat arguing over the debates that's on Sinetta that they gotta
I, I,
pick.
I don't listen to them. I don't listen to the debates anymore because, as I said yesterday, I saw Garfield handle a very professional debate.
Yeah, I like that.
And,
That was good. That was dope.
and after seeing that, I'm not settling for anything less. I'm
Yeah,
not paying $30 for a bullshit debate.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I was so mad last time at that I had brought the damn what did I buy? I brought the Ali Muhammad and
Mm.
Jabari shit. Yo,
Yeah,
I was so mad. I'm like, yo, I just threw $30 the fuck away for no good reason.
right.
I couldn't even listen to the debate. Ali Muhammad, this shit was so stupid. And you can see that the nigga was playing. That's my you feel me, Stupies?
Yeah,
Like,
you
yeah,
can't
you're
tell me
not
$30
even
for bullshit.
convincing. Listen, he's not even convincing no more that he's serious. And the fact that people act like, this nigga is, he's not even, he had a fucking cowboy hat on sitting up there. I say, yo, this nigga is playing
Right.
completely. You feel me? Then before that, I watched the Sanchez and Unk debate. I didn't buy the initial debate. They played it like a week later and they put up a lower price to go get it. Me, I'm a super supportive dude, Joe. Yo, when I clicked on that shit, yo, I was mad again. And I said, I'm never doing this dumb shit again. And lo and behold, I went and copped that goddamn Ali Muhammad because it wasn't nothing to do that Sunday. So I'm just sitting around. I'm like, shit, let me click on and see. And it's a waste of fucking money, yo. It's
It,
like
it,
motherfuckers are sitting up there playing. Like it's not even, oh,
that's my problem with it. It's not the $30 alone, but it's the fact that I could give this $30 to somebody. I have a lot of hungry belly people back home. I could send this $30 to somebody and get more joy from it than spending on that bullshit. There is have to be a level of professionalism. Have to be a level that listen. I'm not grifting you for two people to be talking shit.
yeah, I mean, yo, I was so, and look, since I paid the $30, I couldn't even turn it off. I put that shit on mute and I started watching TV. I muted my computer and I put a fucking movie on, yo. Cause I was like, yo, I just can't click off it. It's like I'm just flushing $30 down a fucking toilet for no good reason. But I couldn't listen to that shit, man. Like it, oh no, hell no. Hell no. But Garfield definitely just did a good one. And I'm not even into the Bible, right? I'm not even into the Bible, but it was still a good debate. You know that both of them was coming from a sound perspective, meaning Gorilla Hebrew, he believes in the Bible, right? and the other dude was a goddamn PhD.
Yeah.
So
Dr. Richard Clark.
yeah, so it made sense. Like
I,
I mean, and I
listen,
actually thought Gorilla Hebrew won.
I believe Gorilla Hebrew brought a level of professionalism to the table that I did not see in the Hebrew Israelite 6 years ago. He was serious about his stuff. His presentation was serious, and he researched his opponent. And he came good to the situation, and I have to give him respect. I believe he won. I believe that everybody won in that debate because everybody could take away something from it. That was a win-win debate. Not this bullshit that not this bullshit that is being pushed.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Now,
because you're my friend means I must put up with bullshit.
now, I will say maybe over on this side, those debates with the abos and stuff, I think that a lot of us has matured past those conversations. I'll say that. You dig what I'm saying? But Sinetta channel is way bigger than ours. So the Lord 30 something people that might come over here, that shit might not be for them. But Sinetta got 1,000 people watching him sometimes. So, you know, a lot of those people, that's what they into. You feel me? They still into arguing with Abo. I never argued with an Abo in my life. I don't, that shit is, and some people might think the Egyptian conversation is something that they would never argue, but arguing with a motherfucker who don't even believe in the slave trade, like I won't do that shit.
No. I love Q Butter channel, because I go on it when I just want to get agitated. And when you listen, nowadays I have the tendency to ask people if they actually believe what they're saying or are they trolling. Because I've heard people talk passionately about Atlantis. I've heard people talk passionately about there being abos, that they've been on the land. And then what I've realized is that the education system has failed us.
Yeah,
It has failed us because our people carry misnomer as if it's fact. And if you can chip away one block at a time, and probably one of the important building blocks we need to chip away is Egypt. They said there was nothing fantastical about these people. There was nothing mystical about these people. Not because they built these big pyramids mean that they were any more special than any other people on the land.
yeah, that's
Is the Chinese special because they built the Great Wall? Is the Great Wall a big accomplishment also? I
yeah.
would like the Great Wall up there with the pyramids.
It it's crazy. Chief X played a guy that was clowning Afrocentrists. It was another black dude, but he was saying, uh, basically, how can y'all say that Egypt was black when that civilization don't even resemble blackness? You feel me? Or what we call blackness. It don't look like the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, right? Far as wise, its architecture, like you will see the remnants of that in sub-Saharan Africa, right? You will see the rudimentary forms of that, technology in sub-Saharan Africa,
No,
right?
but I'm going to tell you something that many people are not telling you. Many of the temples that we become to revere, apart from the pyramid, were built during which period? During the Greek period. Many of the temples were built during the Greek period. You need to go and look at it and realize that this is bullshit. You think, yeah, but many of the temples were built during that period. The pyramids were built far earlier, yes, But many of the other temples and building and architecture that you see in Egypt were built during the Parliament after the Greeks go over Egypt. You
That's
need to go and look
how.
at those temples, the Ptolemaic period. Uh, but
Well,
many persons not going to tell you that.
but but like the greatest ones that is attested to, I think they were mostly Egyptian. Like if you
Right.
the Egypt native built, think about it. The word Egypt actually comes from the name of a temple that was so grand that other people called the country by the name of the temple. That's where we get the word Egypt from. You feel me? I think it was is um that's why when people say that, Egypt ain't an ancient name, it actually is, because I think they found uh the Greeks used it, the Persians had used it, um, and they found it in their writings. Uh it was Hekupata that gets translated as Egypticus, Egyptos, and it comes down to us as Egypt, right? And that was from the Temple of Ptah that was in the city of Memphis. Now that shit is in the north, right?
Yeah, that it is in the north.
Right. So the country was named by foreigners. They called the country from the city of Memphis because of how huge and grand that temple complex was. Right. So the modern word Egypt that we use for that civilization or country is actually a breakdown of Memphis. But it was actually the temple that was in Memphis that they were talking about. So the city of Memphis had to be grand, but that was way before the Greek period. That's my point.
Yeah. I'm not denying that.
Mhm.
I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. But when those Greeks came in to validate themselves, they went on a temple building. They built a lot of temples to validate their rule in the country. Right?
Okay.
They went on that because remember they were outsiders. And how you do? As an outsider, what you say? You say, okay, I need to go on this temple building barrage to let the people believe that I am actually of the people. Because let's look at it this way. After 200 years, most of the population believe that, oh, those people are the rightful people. How much people remember? How much, how much genetic memory go back greater than 200 years? Use today, for example. You and I are here now in 2023. Let's go back to 1823. If it wasn't for books, what would we have known about 1823? If it was recorded? Not a goddamn thing.
Mm, that's true.
People going about the daily life. And when people going about the daily life, you use Maslow hierarchy of human needs. And the most important need is the fundamental need. When the average person going about the daily life, all they're thinking about is food, clothing, shelter, sex. And as they move up, the average person, if we use the Mennonites as an example of how people lived 200-300 years ago, the average person may have had one book, the Bible, and that's the only book, and they spend the waking hours from sunrise to sunset on the farm. Women, when they were not cooking, washing, mending clothes, having babies, what were they doing? How many of them was going to temple?
Who, the women?
The women and men. How many people you think were going to temple? How many farmers was going to temple? Anybody in here ever farm? Farming is an all-day event.
Yeah, they had their own little shrines and stuff closer to their houses, and some of them had shrines and stuff in
Right,
there.
but in their
I
houses.
mean, because a lot of them worship local deities.
Right.
So I mean, and then you had local deities, you had state deities, local deities, and then even down to your family deities, far as wise venerated ancestors that would take on certain attributes of the divine, right? So it was the way to get to the divinity was way more robust than how we, use it nowadays. Like, I think I think monotheism is a little bit more narrower than how those ancient people viewed spirituality, so to say, or religion. It was way more robust and multifaceted, right? The way to commune with the divine. Like ours is narrow as hell, right?
And the reason why it was more robust then, or think about this. When you go home after sunset, so sunset 7 o'clock, and most people after sunset was heading home because there wasn't any street light. So you were heading home. If you live in I am old enough to have visited parts of Jamaica where there weren't electric street lights. There was a joke people used to call it moon on stick, moon pan stick. There wasn't any moon on stick on the road. That means street lights. I've known places that didn't have power growing up as a child, where people relied on kerosene lamp, home sweet home lamp, as a way to light the house because
Wow.
electricity didn't reach them. After 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, the average person would ride with a flashlight on their bicycle and they would head home. 10 o'clock was very late. You never visit somebody's house after 9 or after 8 in the night because the place was dark and that was very late. So rural early people who did not have electricity, 9 o'clock in the night would have been very late. But it's not late enough for you to sleep. So you be around the hearth or the fire. That's why the hearth in many countries, in many cultures, the fireplace was a place of family because you'd be around the fire. And when you're around the fire, what do you do around the fire after you finish eating?
You tell stories.
You tell stories. Some of the scariest stories I've known is when I go to the country, when I was young and there was no electricity. And people start telling duppy story or ghost story around the fire. You're scared shitless, can't sleep. And you could recite a lot of stories until you're ready to go to your bed, and they would recite the stories they hear about Horus and when they hear about this bullshit, and then God will protect them, and the grandmother who was buried in the backyard. Because just in all cultures, your family members was oftentimes buried on the land that you own. If you go to Jamaica now, many houses have 2 and 3 graves in the backyard. I don't know if that is done in America. But back in the day, people were buried on the family land. It's
Yeah,
careless people
that's
carry them family to the cemetery. Go mix up with dirty people. How you going to carry grandma down to the cemetery? Go mix up with dirty people. Grandma must stay where her family is. So grandma was buried where? In the backyard. And sometimes you go down there and you sit down on grandma's grave and you talk to grandma and you tell grandma your problem. Any other Jamaicans in this group in the chat, if I'm lying, I'm dying. And you couldn't step on grandma's grave. That's disrespect. You could sit on our grave if you was our daughter and our son. You could even fall asleep on our grave because grandma will protect you. Grandma offer protection to the family. You think that the same protection that if Africans believe that grandma who's dead and is buried in the backyard protect the family, why ancient people wouldn't believe that grandma who is dead and in the backyard wouldn't protect the family also?
No, you killing it right now.
And I'm talking from personal perspective. I'm not talking about a historical perspective.
Yeah,
Because
but
that
it's
is
all human psychology. You're making 100. Yeah, those ancient people would have made the same connections.
they would have made the same connection.
Yeah, that's psychology 101. Yeah, you killing it.
You're not telling grandma go mix up with no dirty bungle. We're not old nasty people. Grandma buried in the backyard. I remember 10 years ago the big confusion because these people insist. Because after a while, like the governing bodies in like the town decided that listen, no more burials in backyard. And some people went mad, especially the parish called Clarendon, saying, no, I'm not carrying grandma down there mixed up with any infidel. Grandma was a church lady. I was supposed to carry grandma down the cemetery with them infidel and murderers and thieves. Grandma after bury here is grandma land.
Hey yo, hey, y'all click the link, man.
Yeah.
We going over the Gullah channel. He over there rocking. He putting the hands on who is it? Di.
Yeah. What's going on channel name? Let's
He's in
go
the
over
chat. I
together.
just threw it in the chat.
Because honestly, we need to be honest as a people. I realize that the Egyptians weren't special. They weren't special, not because they built two pyramids. They weren't no special in the West African or the South African or the European. We need to
Fact.
be honest.
That's a fact. All right, stupids, let's go over there and kick it with our man Gullah.
Yeah,
Hey,
going over.
everybody go over the Gullah channel. I keep putting the link in the chat. Let's go over there. Let's go over there and kick his ass. He probably over there lying, y'all. He probably over there doing that Midwest shit line. Let's go. Hey, Corey, you owe me $20 for making me go live and not showing up. I was laying in the bed. I ain't want to go live. You owe me. That was crazy. You fell asleep on me. Made me start a show and ain't show up. All right, peace, y'all. Let's go over to Gullah.